hope you understood that this is about how congregations can be more energy efficient and apply conservation, and how solar panels can then help that. But I'll go ahead. Okay, well, good. So a lot of what I'm going to say will apply to homes too, so, and schools and workplaces. So I got involved in this work. I'm actually a LEED accredited professional, but I've retired and now I'm actually back at work. But when I retired, I started doing more environmental work, and my church wanted to get solar panels, and we applied for a grant, and part of that grant was to do some education and outreach. So I gave workshops around the state with a couple of other people. And so I spent hours and hours trying to get that down to 45 minutes. So we'll see how we do. One thing I've said many times is that solar panels are a carrot that gets your congregation or your family really interested in conserving energy. And people I know who have solar panels on their homes, they just watch every kilowatt. So I've broken down my talk into 4 parts. How to get started. If you're with a congregation or with your business, you need to form a team, get somebody else who's passionate about this, talk to your boss or in the case of a congregation, your faith leader. And then you need to learn about your building's energy use. You need to learn what others are doing, and there's a great organization, and they're here today. It's an affiliate of Hoosier Interfaith Power and Light, which I'm going to shorten to HIPPL, because it's easier to say. And then include your congregation in every step of the way so that they know what you're doing and they can support what you're doing, because a lot of it is behavioral. And then we'll talk about reducing costs of heating and cooling, which is usually the largest energy user, and also lighting, and they can be done at the same time. And then some ways of finding funds if we have time to talk about that. So the first step is to form a good team. And I, again, encourage, if you're with a congregation, to meet up with the Hoosier Interfaith Power and Light people, the local group, because they help each other and they share information. And their website, the Hoosier Interfaith Power and Light, or HoosierIPL.org, is a great website. And this is all in your handout. I've learned a lot from people from other congregations and then shared that with my own. So I encourage you to develop your vision. Do you want to try to include solar power? And I've learned this morning that here your electric rates are much higher than Bloomington, where I live, and so it pays for itself in a much shorter amount of time. And then set yourself goals of how much energy you want to try to reduce, and 25% is really doable. Our church has, with the solar panels, we've reduced our carbon footprint, so it's electric and gas, by 50%. We generate about 59% of our electricity. And I became chair of our building and grounds, and that led me to really be able to help make reductions in my own church. And what I do every month is enter, or every quarter, I usually do every month, but you could do it every quarter, enter the utility bills. In my congregation, they were just automatically paid and no one knew what was. We'd budget something at the end of the year, they'd look at what the budget was, but no one really understood what was being spent. So this is really helpful. And then from that, it's pretty easy to plot a graph. I have to, every time I do it, I have to look back, okay, how did I do that? But this one, what I did, and there's, again, it's in your handout, I converted both the therms of gas and the kilowatt hours of electricity to BTUs, which is British thermal units. And that way they're kind of like comparing apples and apples instead of apples and oranges. And then I can put it on one graph, and you can see how the energy use has gone down from when we first started making changes, and then I correlated it to what we had done in the congregation. And that's great to share with the people that you are trying to get to make changes. So we've taken a lot of photos of people in our congregation and others, and we've involved our youth. We have a group called TSICCC. It's Interfaith Community of Environmentalist Youth. And on Martin Luther King Day, they are actually going up to Indianapolis and gathering youth from all over the state and talking to them about how to start their own group, and then teaching them skills to weatherize homes, and then actually go out and weatherize some homes. And then on Valentine's Day, we'll do that in Bloomington. Okay, so as I mentioned, probably the biggest thing you can do is reduce your heating and cooling costs. And one way we've found to do that is heat people, not empty spaces. So don't heat when there's no one there at night. The colder, if we're thinking about winter, the colder it is outside and the hotter it is inside, you're losing more heat faster. So it's better to turn it off at night, or rooms that aren't being used. And then if you have a programmable thermostat, which we recommend, then you can turn that on and early, so that when you come into the space, it's comfortable. Then you can make sure you don't have any holes in your building, and usually there are lots of holes in a home. Sometimes it's where your cable comes in, or in your ceiling. If you have ceiling lights, there's usually a gap around that, and you're losing the heat that you just created. And then you can, the savings that you get from that, you can invest in other technologies. So in my congregation, we kept growing. We started with a 2-story space. Upstairs was where they met for services, and downstairs were classrooms. That now is all class and meeting rooms, and we've added on, and so that we have actually 9 systems, 9 furnaces and 9 air conditioners. And no one really knew that, or you kind of knew where a thermostat was, but you didn't really understand it. And since I was an interior designer, I had the plans, and you could do this by hand. But I figured out where each zone was, where the thermostat was, and then we got programmable ones and those that didn't have it. And we're now, and this is where you need to get your congregation on board, we're now trying to get it so that people think about where they're meeting, and was someone already meeting that afternoon, meet in that room, it's already been heated, and then you wouldn't have to heat that room, a different room. And these are probably that, and setting your thermostat back at night. It's a biggest way to save. It doesn't cost anything, especially if you already have the thermostat. If you don't have the thermostat, Vectren has rebates. So they have rebates for a lot of things. You should check into anything you're going to invest in. The other thing is people tend to want to, they don't know how to use a thermostat, so you need to leave a sign on it. Not to override it, just temporarily use the arrows to get the temperature to change. And so I created signs for the rooms, and this is for one of the youth room. Not to hold it. And the next thing we're doing is getting people to be the monitor. At the end of the day, they'll go and make sure that the thermostats haven't been held, and that the lights are turned off, and that rooms that have a thermostat, we're trying to keep that door closed so that it's not running and heating up the whole hallway. This is what our local school corporation has done, and just by monitoring at night, or in the late afternoon and at night, monitoring the temperature, they've saved that much. So it's about a 30% reduction in 4 years. The next thing, and there's a book at the Hippel table today by Monroe Fritz called Chasing Sacred Air, is to make sure that you seal your gaps before you insulate, and I never knew you needed to do that, but he explains that air can go right through insulation. You have to have something on top as close as possible to the insulation to keep the air from just going through it.
What do you mean, something?
One thing you can use is just plastic, or a board, like a drywall, thin the 1/4 inch. So insulation does some good, but it doesn't reach its full potential unless it's next to some solid. The next thing is, how do you know what's leaking? Well, on a cold day, like I think this coming week, you can see the difference. You can probably feel the difference. A lot of times around a window frame, you can actually feel the cold air coming in, or under your door. Or I had a dream that I had gaps all around my doors. I realized last night it was just a dream.
I think that's a nightmare.
That was a nightmare. So these are images that actually colleagues and I took. We have a thermal camera for the county that we're able to use. And this is a ceiling fixture. You might have it in your kitchen or your living room. A lot of churches have ceiling lights that are like that. And on the upper floors, it's just above it is the attic. And if they didn't seal around that fixture, then you're losing air there. An attic hatch in a home is another thing, and also in congregations. Yes?
As much, and I appreciate what you're saying in terms of helping us reduce costs, but I thought a certain amount of airflow was encouraged.
Yeah, she's asking if isn't a certain amount of airflow encouraged, and yes, but you're going to find that there always going to be plenty of airflow.
Okay.
So you get
and so you don't have to worry about sealing it up too much.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's going to seal it up too much. The only person I know who has that issue, and then you get air, you force air to circulate. He's got walls that it's called SIPs, and his walls are an insulated material that are that thick. But most of us, we're going to have a lot of air come through. Another place, if you have a basement in your congregation or in your home, a place that we find a lot of air leakage is right above here. And you can put insulation in, but you also need to put something that seals that. So that,
Spray-on foam.
yeah, the Great Stuff is one brand of spray-on foam that's easy to use. A lot of this work can be done by volunteers, but a lot of things that may need to be done are hidden. It's hard to know unless a professional eye looks. And Carol, I heard this morning, was talking, she's back there, and she'll be at the affiliates table for Hipple. He knows where to look. He knows where other congregations, or they do homes as well, have had trouble. And this actually is his own church, and that's his son's hand. They found there was a gap in the duct system in what we call an unconditioned space. It's a space you're not trying to heat or cool, your attic, or a lot of times it's on the side, it's on the side of a wall, it's not necessarily above. And so every time they turned the heat or air conditioning on, it was going into the attic part of it. And so, you can see ka-ching, 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 you're losing money, it's not just energy. And the next thing is adding insulation, and people ask where to add it. Attic space is usually the first place, and then how much is enough, and that's depending on where you live. And I put this in your handout, this little map. You can also, a couple of good resources, EnergyStar.gov and the EPA will have maps like this. You can just Google it and find it. If you're going to hire someone to put in insulation, get more than one quote. That's always a good idea. And be sure that they're doing the sealing around vents and wiring in your attic space or around your light fixtures. So before I learned much about this, I had my own attic insulated, and I went to a talk and they talked about sealing and insulating, and then they didn't do the sealing. I found out later that they didn't seal around my light fixtures or the wiring or the vents. And once the insulation is in there, it's harder to do. You can't see where it's safe to step, so it's usually best to do that first, if you can. So, and this is how they're using a caulk to seal around. Your HVAC system, your heat and cooling systems, it's important to keep them up to in good shape. And for our congregation, we had someone come in twice a year, once for the heating and one for the cooling. And I've learned that that wasn't enough. They weren't noticing problems, and they weren't changing filters often enough. So we now have 4 times a year. And it costs a little bit more for that, and actually it's not much more than the other. We went to a different firm. But they're going to extend the life of our equipment by keeping it in good shape and make it run at its peak efficiency. So again, savings will slowly add up for these changes. This is a colleague's church. He found out nobody was changing the filter. So the kind of bluish line, that's where there was a bar across it so that no air was passing through, and the rest of it, it was just covered in dust and hair and who knows what. So make sure that whoever is supposed to do it is doing it, and find out if someone is assigned that job, because in his church nobody was assigned to do it. The other thing to think about for your heating and cooling is predictive maintenance, and I worked on this solar panel grant, and so I had to research a lot of things about the church, walked through it and learn about it ahead of time. And one of the things we had to do for our grant application is say how we would save energy. And so we planned when we needed to change our HVAC system, we would get more efficient. So I got quotes, and so I could include that in the grant. Well, then they asked me if I'd be chair of the Building and Grounds starting June 30th. Well, 4th of July weekend, our sanctuary air conditioner went out. And so it was a hot weekend. And they knew I was into energy efficiency, but I said, no, I didn't do it on purpose. But luckily I had already found out what's available, what kind of rebates were available, and was ready to go ahead. So I recommend you do that. And because your system, you need to, and again, I think I put some notes in your handout about boilers last maybe 25 years. Other systems might last 15 to 20. Know what it should last, but know that it may not. Something will happen. And our system had been repaired several times, and there's a point where the repair, it's better just to go and get a new system. All the new systems are much more efficient. Older systems might be 80% efficient, meaning you're losing 20% of the heat that you create. The new systems can be 95 or more efficient, which is, I think, what this slide is showing you. Energy Star, I'm sure you've seen that if you bought any appliances or anything else. It also applies to HVAC systems. And they will rate you, and there's up to 98% efficiency. So you can see how 18% of what you were paying for was being lost, and that is now not being lost. I can share slides with you if you want later. So I think I'm going to do all right by my time, because I tend to talk fast when I'm nervous. So any questions about that before I go on to the next section? Yes?
One question I have is bathroom vents.
Yes.
That take a lot of...
Yes, okay, so bathroom vents, and the picture of the ceiling fixture, I had another one of a bathroom vent. A lot of times around that, it's just losing air when it's not on. And then in a place like this, and which I'm going to talk about next, controls. When you control lights in a restroom, you're controlling the fan a lot of times, and that's really important. You really don't need it to run all the time. So you can set how it runs. You can get some that are motion detective, and there are also some that will tell if there's a body in the room. They tell the heat. So if someone's going to be...
In a home, if there's a window in the bathroom, does there really have to be a vent?
I don't know what the code is. I think a vent, it's good to run a vent a little bit if you need to air out the room. What I did at our house was for my children who were not good about turning off lights or vents, is I put it on a timer. It's actually just an analog. You turn the thing and it...
Well, mine's connected right to the light, so every time I go in there, it's on. You need it, except when you're bathing.
That's too bad. So maybe you can put a lamp in or something that's not connected to the fan. Yeah, my daughter turns that on every time, but at least it turns itself off. So, and she's 27. So she's back home for 6 months, and I noticed, she's turning on the fan. So these are the two areas that I'll talk briefly about: lighting and controls and new technologies, and then appliances and equipment and what to watch for there and how you can affect it. So we just talked about controlling lights and fans together. Encourage people to remember to turn the light off, and that's something our local school system, the children have a campaign called Lights Out. And they've actually done what I did in here, which is turn out half the lights. We don't need all the lights on a lot of times. So that's something you can do for free, right? Just turn your lights out. Don't turn on as many lights if you don't need them all. Use daylight if you can. And then add controls to lights. If you find that people just are not turning lights out, you can add a control to that, and eventually, fairly soon that will pay itself off. And then you can think about controls on your outdoor lights. What I do is motion sensor, and you can have dawn, dusk, and then motion, so that it turns on when it gets dark, and then if someone comes by, it'll turn on. It won't happen. That won't happen in the daylight. It will only happen at night. And it's better for security if you think about it, because you don't really care if nobody's near your property. You want some lights that highlight it, for a congregation. But if someone's coming close and the light goes on, then you'll know they're there. Other people will see them. So. Then upgrading lights is something that a lot of the utilities have been promoting, and so you may have been given a chance to have Energizing Indiana is what it was a couple of years ago, and they brought people CFLs, which are compact fluorescent. Since that time, LED lights have really improved, and I'll talk a little bit about that and how to make decisions, because the price has come down, and that's a really good thing to put your money into. So what you need to look at in lights is if you're used to a 100-watt light bulb and you want that equivalent, it's calculated in lumens. And there's a chart in your handout that I'll show you in a minute. And then you think about the brightness. LEDs, for example, are brighter than incandescent, so you don't need as much brightness maybe as you would have. Also think about bulb life. LEDs last 25 to 50,000 hours, so like 10, 20 times longer than an incandescent or fluorescent. And then think about your initial cost. Yes, they cost more to buy, but they'll last a lot longer. If you have a high ceiling space, you just put them in once every, you don't have to put the scaffolding up or ladders as often. So. That's an easy fix. Exit lights. Okay, this was something that I thought was really interesting. If you have incandescent still exit lights, the old ones, installing LED exit lights, which are actually brighter, will pay for themselves in less than a year, and then after that you're saving a little bit of money every year. So, and I believe there are rebates, so look into that if you have it, if you still have. And you can tell if it's incandescent usually because it creates a lot of heat. LEDs and fluorescent don't create as much heat, which is why they're more efficient. 90% of incandescent light is heat. So especially in the summer, you're heating your space. And it's not an efficient way to heat your space, so in the winter either. So this is the chart I was talking about. It talks about lumens and how that compares to what you might be used to in an incandescent. So say 100 watt might be 1,300 lumens, how much light is output. And if you look all the way across the CFLs versus the LEDs, so each technology has been more efficient. And when your electric costs are as high as they are here, you're going to pay for the lights pretty quickly.
Why does it have a range of the lumens, like 600 to 900?
It depends on the brand of light. So I've looked up, he asked why is there a range, and that you can check when you're purchasing something or go online to check it. Again, look for Energy Star. LEDs, for example, have Energy Star ratings. So some of the range is because different manufacturers were different. Good question, thanks.
So there's no real equivalent of 1 watt to so many lumens?
So he's asking if there, I have to repeat questions for the video. If there's an exact equivalent, well, you can kind of figure it out, I guess.
That would still be a range.
Yeah.
60 to
Yeah.
80 in that case.
Yeah.
Because I bought some of these lights with lumens, and they weren't giving me enough light as the incandescent did. And when I looked at this, it had a range, so I was trying to figure out if there is a way that I could buy an equivalent amount of illumination, a light, when I change.
So he's asking if, how to know how many lights you're going to need. What we did in my congregation is I purchased one, and we tried it out and figured out if that was what we needed, and then we bought 50 more. So for your home, you do the same thing, just buy one and try it. And my sister's very sensitive to light, and she thinks all LEDs are too bright, so they tend to be brighter. But it varies by...
What I ran into is that the socket would only take a certain light. And if you go to a different one, then maybe you have to replace the whole thing.
Well, okay, so he's asking if you have to replace the whole fixture to change to LEDs, and we're in a Duke Energy where I live, and they have what they call a Duke Savings Store where you can buy different lights, and so they're all online, and they have the base that you screw in or slip in, have a wide variety. If you go to Lowe's or Menards, they may not have that variety, but you can go to 1000bulbs.com and they have a wide variety. And read the labels, read the Energy Star. There's a question.
We're a veteran trade ally, so if you want to have, Vectren has some very good rebates.
Oh, good.
Duke Energy, so if you want to have a site assessment done, just call us and we'll make an appointment. We'll bring Vectren with us, and they'll walk through your church or your business and evaluate your lighting, and then they will give you a report right there at the end of the site assessment to show you what your savings will be and the cost. So typically it's like a 3-year payback.
That's great. Did you catch that? Okay, so afterwards you can talk to, what's your name?
Brad Morton.
Brad Morton?
Yeah.
He's works through with Vectren to assess a trade ally. Okay, so they can assess your congregation for free and tell you what you need and what you can do. That's great. Thank you. Let's see. I think I have another. The other thing this may be not exact, but you can see and I believe this is on if you use your lights 8 hours a day, like a work week. This is how much you would save, and this is again based on 10 cents a kilowatt hour, and here I guess it's 16 cents, so you'd save more. But the lamp life you can see like 2.5, 3 months versus 10 years or more for LEDs. So another reason to not get sticker fright from seeing the price of an LED. They've come way down. You might be able to get rebates on them. We could from Duke. And I think Vectren would have this similar rebates. And that depends on, you need to make sure you get the Energy Star bulbs for the rebates. And any more questions about lighting? Yes.
I've noticed with LEDs, you can buy some LEDs that are like $1.50 or $2. Now these are LEDs, but the life they say is only 4.5 years.
Yeah.
Are they making some cheaper ones?
They are making cheaper ones, so that's why I say go to the Energy Star website, read reviews, talk to the trade allies. What I look for is the warranty, and they should have at least a 5-year warranty, especially if you're changing, like we did our whole sanctuary, 76 lights. So you want to make sure that you're getting the right thing when you're doing that.
There's a qualification called Design Light Consortium. It's called DLC certification, and all of the lights that Vectren have to be eligible, DLC certified. So it's kind of a quality control type of certification.
Okay.
So
if you work with the Vectren Trade Ally, there's DLC, is that certified?
That's the terminology.
Okay.
I've got one more.
Yes.
Not necessarily a question, it's just a feed in, I guess. A few years back, where I work at, I kind of changed out a lot of the lighting. We used to use a rough service light bulb, regular incandescent light bulb. Used to cost like $2, $2.50. And we have a lot of lighting that are enclosed in a glass thing. And we would change it, I had to change them every 6 months.
Yeah.
So then I started using the CFLs, and I've gotten some when we started that. That's been 6, 7, 8 years, no longer than that. I always date it when I put it in. Some of them lasted 7 and 8 years. But now the ones I'm buying do not last that long. They last me maybe a year.
Interesting. So you better switch to LEDs. He's saying that. Yeah. Also, if you're in a closed space, you have to make sure that there's enough air circulation for your light bulb, because even LEDs are vented. They create some heat. So I don't know if I need to repeat all that he said. Okay. All right, so what else uses electricity in your building? And are things left on when no one's really using them? And are they old and inefficient? So what uses the most energy in a lot of homes are refrigerators, and if they're older than 15 years, they'll pay for themselves in a few years with the energy savings for Energy Star refrigerator. In a workspace, once we've talked about heating and cooling and lighting, you probably have a kitchen in your congregation. So you may have a refrigerator. We have 2 kitchens, and the upstairs has a small refrigerator. But how old is it, and is it Energy Star? Okay, things that use power often when nobody's watching or using them. One thing is your whole computer system. Is it really shut off when no one's there? Now at IU where I work now, again, they do security work overnight, but most churches don't have that. And so you can actually turn it off when you leave for the day. And it's called phantom or vampire loads, things that, anything with a light on it, if it's plugged in, it's drawing some power. So your television sets or your monitors are drawing power even when they're not in use. There's something called Kilowatt, or Trickle Star is another brand that I like. You can plug equipment into it and see how much energy it's using, and you can put in your cost per kilowatt, and it actually calculate right there how much you're using. Yes?
I've been told you can check those out from the Evansville library system.
Okay, good, because we can do that in the Monroe County Library
I've
too.
never done it.
So you can check those out from your local library. And one brand is Kilowatt, and what we use in Monroe County is Trickle Star. I like that because you can plug it in. It's got like a curly wire between what you read and what you plug in, so you don't have to get down under the refrigerator to read how many watts it uses. Something like a refrigerator. Oh, you've got one with you, great. I'm trying to say. A refrigerator you need to leave plugged in for a week. So this is the Kilowatt. We can pass this around. And then the other brand, Trickle Star. So you can take a look at that. It's not worth having, each individual doesn't need to have one, so your congregation could buy one. Our congregation owns a couple, and people can check them out, and now our library is doing it. So that's a way to tell, and something that's like, that you think, oh well, it's not using much energy, plug it in and find out. Kids love doing this, so if you're an educator, one thing we've done that's been really a hit is to have a little display with a hairdryer, say, and a toaster oven, and have people guess how much energy they use, and then show them how much it really uses. And is your phone charger drawing energy all the time? Is your laptop drawing energy when it's plugged in? So switch it off, put it in a surge protector, switch it off, and then it won't be.
Stop at 11.
Okay.
And there's only going to be a 10-minute break because we're that far behind.
Yep.
And Barbara, you keep them on schedule.
All right. Okay, I think I talked generally about that. And again, I knew that we were going to be short on time, and so a lot of information that I knew I wouldn't have time to say is in your handout. There's also a link to the HIPPL website, Using Energy Prudently resources, and all our resources are there as a PDF, and you can invite someone from HIPPL to come and speak to your congregation. Briefly, I want to talk about, well, how do you pay for upgrades? Well, the first thing is to do the things that are free. So make sure that you're turning your thermostat down, make sure your lights are being turned off. It's worth investing in a programmable, 7-day programmable thermostat for your congregation if you don't have those for all your thermostats, because that way you can program it to come on early enough on a cold morning so that the room is warm when the staff arrives or when your services are being held. Also, volunteers can do a lot of this work. I mentioned I didn't keep the slide, but I went around with Monroe Fritz, who has done several local congregations, buildings. So he's gone to several with me in Bloomington. And in one of them, he had a thermal camera, which shows you how much heat. It doesn't, instead of light, it records heat. And we could see that the top part of their congregation's wall was cold. So, well, why is that? So we had some volunteers from their church. We climbed behind to see, and it was attic space. So, okay, that's one reason, because it's the lower part of the sanctuary wall has heated space behind it, but the sanctuary, the very top of it is attic because of the way the roof sloped. But also they had insulation, but there were gaps, and it was kind of falling down. And then there was no thermal barrier there, and that's where he said just put visqueen, which is a plastic. That's all it would take. Patch up the insulation and put that, and that would save both heating and cooling in that room. Yes?
You can rent those thermal cameras. You can rent the thermal camera.
You can rent it? Okay, that's good to know. So you can rent a thermal camera.
I think one of the rental places. I can
Yeah,
check it.
okay, I understand. Yeah.
Somebody in our congregation actually rented one.
Okay.
Okay.
They used it for a week, but there is a place you can rent it.
Just a second. Okay, also universities often have them, and they have students who want to learn how to do things, so they may come. And the price of those has come way down. And the other thing I should have brought, but I didn't think to, there's something called a thermal gun that just costs $25. And it doesn't give you the whole image, but you point it to an interior wall and register what the temperature is, and then you can point it to the exterior wall near your window or an outlet on the exterior wall, and it will show you the difference. So you can find a lot of leaks that way. And there's a question up front.
Yeah, is there a big difference between batting and cellulose insulation?
Okay, so he's asking if there's much difference in the type of insulation, say batting versus cellulose. There is some difference, and they will tell you how many inches of it you need to get to your R level.
As far as sealing capability?
Not really. The bat, if it has like a craft paper, is some sealing, but that usually it doesn't go everywhere. So you still need to seal underneath and at any cracks.
Okay.
And a lot of us have some insulation, and then they'll add loose insulation on top. And it doesn't matter. That's fine to do that. You can add one type on top of another. Let's see. So I talked about getting volunteers to do the work and having youth do the work. We have our youth just really excited about this, and we have a new, a very young youth here. It's their world that we're leaving the world to them. And so some of the workshops that I've helped to present, we ask people, why are they here? And people will say, for our grandchildren. So we really need to think about what are we doing to the earth, and what are we leaving behind? I've also taken what they call webinar. It's a seminar where you aren't actually near the presenter, but you watch on your computer or listen. And there's an organization in Maryland that has given several of these, and they pointed out that taking a loan to do, say you have a very inefficient furnace, take out a loan, have your provider help you figure out how much it would cost to upgrade, how much you would be saving, what the interest rate, which is still very low on loans, would be. It often pays for itself quickly, and you can pay back your loan. And then the other thing is, as you save energy, watch that. So you're watching your bills and you can figure out, okay, well, we've saved $2,000 this year. We're going to put that in a fund, and when we need to replace our furnace, we can go the extra mile. So they'll have a standard furnace or air conditioner. It pays to go a couple steps above that. It's like when you buy a computer, you don't need to necessarily buy the fastest one they make, but get above the standard, because pretty soon it's going to be out of date. So go a step ahead, put money aside so that you can afford to do that, because it will pay for itself in a few years. I think I just go back to the summary. Oh no, okay. So I talked a little bit about incentives and rebates, and there's information in your handout. They're available for high efficient lights, appliances like refrigerators if you're going to replace one, for your furnace or for heat pumps, and for insulation. And before I get too far, does anyone have a heat pump? Because okay, so heat pumps are different in terms of your thermostat setting. There, you don't want to be upping and lowering it. So that's a caution.
And it's a geothermal heat pump.
Okay, yeah, so you're in good shape. Is that for a home or for a?
For a home.
Yeah, that's great. So because the way a heat pump operates, you might kind of set the emergency backup, which is electric, going if you try to change the thermostat too much. But for most of us, it'd be fine to go way down. We go down to 55. Some churches go down to 50 degrees at night, and just make sure it comes on. You have to kind of figure it out over time. It comes on in time to get your space comfortable the next day. Now I know it's in the in the promotion for this, it talks about solar power, and I didn't talk too much about it because it's so particular to where you live. The payback in this area is actually much quicker than where I live because your rates are higher. And rates are going up for all of us. Everybody in Indiana's rates are going up. So,
Protesting.
yes, because her rates are going to be very high. And then, as we heard this morning, it's also for most of us, we're here because it's really an ethical issue. So if you can, I say, conserve first, go for efficiency as you need to replace things, and then if you can put the savings towards something, put them towards solar in this area. You're further south than I am, you have higher rates, it's going to pay for you in maybe 8 to 10 years, maybe less. Also, people in our congregation, and myself included, I have too much shade on my home, so I couldn't put solar panels at home. So I donated money toward the churches getting solar panels, and a lot of people did. So we got a grant for $25,000, but members donated $53,000. So we have 96 panels. Like I said, it pays. Let's see, I can't remember the dollar amount, but it covers 60%, close to 60% of our electricity need. We use more than half of it at the time it's made, and the rest goes back to the grid, and we get a credit for that. Do you have a question? Yes. Time. All right, that's it. Perfect. Thank you.